James Raynor has overall responsibility for Grosvenor's Britain and Ireland business, which owns and manages the London estate in Mayfair and Belgravia, as well as having development projects elsewhere in London and the UK. And he was appointed to the role as CEO in January this year. So, James, can you tell me what you see as the holistic, the wider benefits of large estates like Grosvenor, particularly at this difficult time?
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. I think it is that word that you just used, holistic, that's very important. I think that we're not the owner of a single building on a single street. You know, we have involvement in a much wider area. So we're very much forced to think about the community, our role in the community, and how so many different facets of that tapestry are intertwined, and they all obviously, you know, play off each other. We hope that if we get it right, that ultimately the sum of the parts, you know, is greater than those individual parts. I think it pushes us to have a very open and partnership approach to how we work, and I think that that's just generally, you know, a good way of working. You know, I think that if we think about the COVID issue that we're all dealing with now, you know, it's forced us to really have a response that is probably very different to that of, you know, a traditional sort of landlord in a way, not just because we've had to, you know, financially in some cases help our tenants, but we've had to think about, you know, practical ways that we can help all of those sort of broader districts pull themselves back up, from coordinating marketing to helping deal with the council to providing practical advice to our teams, volunteering, to charity and so on, because at the end of the day, you know, our own fortunes are entirely tied up with the fortunes of the districts and the neighbourhoods that we're involved with and helping to manage. So I think it does make you think differently about things.
So one of the things that Grosvenor's been doing some years really is on the delivery of improved space for walking and of course of cycling as well. So what are you doing as a result of the instructions from Downing Street, the new regulations from the Department of Transport to deliver safer streets across the estate as we come out of COVID-19?
I mean, I think that Mayfair and Belgravia are more friendly to pedestrians and cyclists than they were. But you know, frankly, if I'm honest, I think there's a long way to go, as I think there's a long way to go across the whole city. I think that the way that we need to think about cities and putting people, you know, at the forefront of everything is absolutely crucial, and even more so when we're now going to be entering into a phase of forced social distancing. You know, I look at one of the positives in a way of this crisis. I think it's important to constantly look for positives. Is, you know, the impact on the environment is very good, and I think it would be an absolute shame for us to go backwards. So I guess on several levels, you know, one in terms of how we've positioned ourselves as a business. You know, we're being very clear about our commitment to being net zero carbon in 2030. Now that's a commitment. Obviously, we need to follow that up. But when I look at a lot of the major projects that we're doing, be them Cundy Street development or South Molton Triangle or indeed even Grosvenor Square itself, you know, the aim here is to genuinely improve the environmental standards and quality and excellence of our areas, which is the benefit of all the people around. I think in Grosvenor Square, we've got an opportunity to create really one of the most impressive garden squares with massive amounts of diversity in the world, really. And that, I think, is a real benefit to, you know, the people on the streets in a way. I think we don't obviously own the streets. It's the Westminster Council, to an extent, are in control of that. But I suppose we have some level of influence, and we spend a lot of time, and I spend a lot of time, you know, building those relationships in order to try and influence things towards a position where there is a lot more of the road given towards people and cyclists than anything else. And I think that that is very much the way that it should be.
Grosvenor's early development, of course, was driven by the demand from residents of the City of London who moved westwards as a result of plague and fire back in 1666 and 1665. So what do you think the impact of this particular plague is likely to be? If more people work from home, how will that impact on areas like Mayfair and Belgravia?
Yeah, Peter, I think that's a great question and a very intriguing one. And I wish I had genuinely all of the answers. And there's no way that I do right now because I think it's early. But I think that we can be absolutely certain that there will be quite significant change. I mean, I think there was a lot of change was occurring anyway. You know, I think that there was a move towards more flexible working. I think we all know that the retail industry was going through, you know, a real sea change and a shift in consumer attitudes. This crisis has absolutely accelerated that, I think, you know, and it's sort of pulled the band-aid off in a way. So I think we do need to reimagine in neighbourhoods on the basis of what could happen in the future, not what has happened. I think that our estates, you know, over the last 300 years have proven to be, you know, very adaptable. You know, the uses have changed, you know, the society has changed, what people need from buildings has changed, and it's done quite well. I look to play to our strengths where I can. I think that there is still, you know, there's wonderful architecture in our areas. They are incredibly pleasant to be in, and I think that that is really important. I think there's this whole mixed use is very important. Strong cultural offer. We have 25 acres of green space. It's a very well connected area. These are all things that will still remain important. How we make adjustments and how we actually adapt, I'm not entirely sure how that will play out. What I think is that it's likely that tenants and occupiers of spaces will want more flexibility. They will require that the owner of property has a much better operational understanding of them, and that there's a much more genuine partnership approach to things. And I think that overall that may create a bit of turbulence as we get used to that. But I think that probably longer term, it's not a bad thing because it will help keep places fresh and vibrant.
So as you talk about the longer term and adaptability and mixed use, so I think I've heard you call it the la mixité, having worked in France, which is I think a rather more elegant way of saying it. But Grosvenor have long since completed a 20-year plan. Does that mean your plan needs to be rewritten, or do you feel it's robust enough to see us through the next few years as well?
I think, like with any plan, you know, I think it sets out some good guidelines and some good directions. It's not especially prescriptive, but I think it would be wrong for me to sort of say that it won't change or doesn't need to change, because everything should change according to the circumstances. And I think that's really what we need to think about. The adaptability of our areas. You know, if you go back in history to when we started, there was no electricity, no cars, it was horses and so on. You know, we've adapted to that, and we're going to need to adapt again. And I think that, you know, the need of our tenants is what we need to provide for. We are a service provider. You know, I think property overall is an enabler of businesses. You know, my aim would be that for us as a company, you know, we provide places and properties that become essential to our customers. So whether those customers are, you know, are young student residents, or people who are, you know, working, or people who are, you know, frequenting restaurants, those mixes change. But I think that if you look at all success stories in cities around the world, inclusive places work the best. They have the best feeling, they feel open, they feel generous, they feel warm. And I think that we need to strive for that. I think, you know, if we layer onto that you know, a great desire to tackle the climate emergency that we're facing, and we place a great deal of emphasis on the people who are there on the streets and their well-being, then I think that none of that goes against what's in the plan. I think it's just a question of every plan will need adapting and finessing as we go forward, and that's what I plan to do.
James Raynor, thank you very much. It's very reassuring, of course, to talk to you, because as an estate, you've been through wars, disasters, and all sorts of issues that we're facing today and have survived. So it's a great example for all of us. Thank you very much indeed.